We are not teasing that we have Trevor Matich on the line with us, ESPN college football analyst. Trevor, we appreciate you taking the time on your Saturday to talk some college football with us. Pete and I just got done discussing Arch Manning, and so I want to know from your perspective, is Arch Manning for real this year?
Yes, Kate, I think he absolutely is. And the thing is, though, the expectations are so high. And it's those expectations, I think, that are giving people a bit of pause. I mean, I've heard people say, Paul Feinbaum famously among them, that Arch Manning will be the best quarterback, not just in the nation, but since Tim Tebow. And say what you want about Tebow in the NFL, he was one of the greatest college quarterbacks to ever live. And to put that on Arch Manning right now, I think I wouldn't do, just because I'm not sure he'll be the best quarterback in the SEC this year. I mean, in South Carolina, Lenora Sellers is a massive running back with a cannon for an arm that's extraordinarily difficult to defend. DJ Lagway of Florida came on strong at the end of the season. And then you've got the quarterback over at LSU, who is a guy that, Garrett Nussmeier, who doesn't have the arm talent of Arch Manning, but he has a lot more experience, and he'll be in the NFL as well. And so you've got a whole bunch, you've got John Mateer transferred into Oklahoma, who may end up being the first team all-SEC quarterback. And so you put all this together, and I think Arch Manning is for real. Whether he's going to be the best quarterback in the nation, I think remains to be seen. But there's two things I think he needs to do. One is he needs to avoid mistakes. When he played in relief of Quinn Ewers at Texas last year, he made some mistakes. I mean, in the pocket, he wasn't quite as aware as he should have been, and he fumbled the ball a few times. He took some big hits as a runner that he shouldn't have taken. And so these are some things that he'll need to improve on in order to meet those incredibly high expectations.
But it seems, hi Trevor, how you doing? It feels like I have yet to hear, I was telling Kate before, even behind the scenes, our little sewing circles of college football, I have yet to hear anyone say anything negative about this kid. And because of the popularity of the Mannings, and because this guy is so likable, and you mentioned Tebow, like that's, you're talking about, yes, he didn't do great in the pros. He is probably the greatest college player of all time. If you look at what he accomplished, that's way high praise. But so it seems like this guy is so can't miss. He's so likable. He's got all the tools. He's been coached up in the Manning system. If he's not great, wouldn't it be seen as it's more on Sarkisian and the coaching staff for not really putting him in that position more than it is him not being up to the hype?
Yeah, I think that's fair, Pete, on the surface, although I think the biggest risk for him is his offensive line. They lost 4 offensive linemen from last year's team, including both tackles, to the NFL. And they brought in a bunch of talent from the transfer portal on the offensive line, and in addition to guys that they've been developing that were homegrown there at Texas. And if that offensive line doesn't gel, it'll have talent. But if it doesn't gel as a unit and pick up all the stunts and blitzes that opponents will be throwing at him, then that's a risk for Arch Manning, because now he'll have to worry about staying upright rather than throwing the ball deep down the field. And so that's the big deal. I mean, people also point to the receivers. I mean, they lost some receivers, their top receivers, to the NFL. I think 2 in the first round. Tight end Gunnar Helm is now a Tennessee Titan. He's one of the best receiving tight ends in college football last year. But they brought in some terrific receivers from the transfer portal, and they've got some guys that they've been developing there. They still have one of the best groups of wide receivers in the nation. So to me, it'll come down to whether the offensive line is able to gel and give Manning enough time. And you're right, if it doesn't work out for him, then people are going to start pointing fingers. And, it's really hard to point fingers at Arch. He's done things the right way by all accounts. You can't point it at his family, who are legends and deservedly so. And it would be really difficult to point at Steve Sarkisian, the coach, because he is one of the most brilliant offensive designers and play callers in college football. So I think right now the real pressure is on that new offensive line.
except on that second goal from against Notre Dame. It was a big problem there for him. But yeah, so you listed off all the great starting quarterbacks in the SEC this year. The interesting part about this season, though, is like last year we went into the season. It's like, okay, who are the starting quarterbacks of the top teams? Well, if you're into college football, you kind of knew how good Will Howard was. He was at least an experienced player coming in from Kansas State. You knew who Riley Leonard was at Duke, at least a little bit before he came to Notre Dame. You knew who Carson Beck was. You knew Quinn Ewers. This year, you do have Drew Aller. Like you mentioned, Manning does not have a ton of experience. He played like, UTSA and ULM and teams like that. And then you've got a new quarterback. The average college football fan has no chance if you say, give me the starting college quarterback at Ohio State, at Notre Dame, at Michigan, at Georgia, at Oregon, and a slew of other top teams. Out of all these top teams, who needs their quarterback to shine the brightest to get back up to that college football playoff level?
Well, I think the most pressure certainly is going to be on Penn State's Drew Aller. 2 years ago, Drew Aller really struggled in a lot of ways compared to what the expectations were based on his talent. Last year, he had a new offensive coordinator. They started throwing the ball deep down the field more, and Drew Aller kind of stepped up and very quietly had one of the best seasons from any quarterback in college football last year, even though a lot of people didn't really realize how good he had become. This year now, you talk about all the new quarterbacks at the contenders. This year, Penn State really and Clemson are the top contenders for a national championship that bring back their quarterback. You can make the case for LSU and Garrett Nussmeier as well, but pretty much everybody else is breaking in somebody new. And when you talk about Drew Aller, he's going to have one of the best offensive lines in the country. They brought in some new receivers, and that's been a problem at Penn State. They haven't really had enough guys that could stretch the field and finish deep passing plays in a way that scared defenses. Now, on paper, they do. And, of course, they've got one of the best running back tandems in all of college football. And so, Drew Aller right now will be either the linchpin towards a national championship run, or he'll be the scapegoat of Penn State as the quarterback with all the talent who wasn't able to put it together. This is the year for Penn State. And of all the quarterbacks in the nation, I think Drew Aller has the most pressure.
Trevor, speaking of quarterbacks, you played at BYU, won a national championship there. What can you tell us about the quarterback situation and kind of mess that's gone on there over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, Kate, it's been a real mess. For people who aren't aware, BYU starting quarterback ran into trouble with the honor code. And so that means that they were going to suspend him for 7 games, and he chose to transfer instead. So now they've got 3 guys, including freshman Bear Bachmeier, who transferred in from Stanford, who are now, after spring, fighting for the starting job. So heading into the camp, instead of BYU having their starting quarterback situation settled and that guy getting the first team reps, you've got 3 guys that are splitting first team reps, and they're going to have to figure out who the starter is going to be. And so that's a problem because BYU was picked to contend for the Big 12 championship this year. The thing is, though, one thing that tends to happen in this kind of a situation is that teams tend to come together and they become better as a group than they ever would have been had they not had the adversity. I think that all 3 guys at BYU can throw the ball. They're going to have a very good wide receiver core. The running back situation looks good, and BYU, as they always do, has a big, beastly offensive line, and they brought in some transfers to bolster their defensive line. This will be one of the best defenses BYU has had in recent memory. And I think people will overlook BYU because Jake Retzlaff, the quarterback that left the program now, otherwise would have been the starter, because he's gone, BYU, people are thinking BYU isn't going to compete. But remember this, the last year, in their second year in the Big 12, BYU finished in a 4-way tie for first place in the Big 12 at the end of the regular season. They didn't play in the Big 12 championship game because of a tiebreaker. They just lost out on that tiebreaker. And so I think BYU right now is kind of in a bunker mentality, and people are going to overlook them, and that's where they want to be. And as long as the young quarterback doesn't make a lot of mistakes and turn the ball over, they have enough talent to be able to compete in the same way in the Big 12.
And it's the most overlooked thing I think about last year. It get completely blown off. They beat SMU. Like, I know the college football playoff committee was going for just records and things like that, but BYU had a case to be made that, like, we beat that SMU team that everyone's going to put in the college football playoff. So I'll ask you this: the toughest question in college football right now. Who's winning the Big 12? Like, everybody is good. Like, all of a sudden, Houston and Cincinnati are good. Texas Tech bought itself a great team. Like, every single team in that conference, if it could be this year's Arizona State and rise up and say, if you said, like, Kansas is going to win the Big 12, that's not crazy. Like, every team is good in this conference.
They really are. And last year, it was a real roll of the dice as to who would win it. You talk about Arizona State. They won the Big 12 championship game and took Texas in the playoff to overtime. And so they had a good chance of advancing in the playoff as well. But they were picked last in the Big 12 last year preseason. They went from last picked to first overall. And so I think that they still will be one of the best teams in the Big 12, even though they lost their great running back, Cam Scatterbo. They still bring back a ton of experience, especially at quarterback. And then Baylor, with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback, was on fire the last 6 games of the season, and they're going to be a team that's going to be hard to contend with. Colorado has brought in a whole bunch of new talent, and it'll be interesting to see how they do. Iowa State is one of the most experienced teams in the nation with an experienced quarterback in Rocco Beck. You mentioned Kansas with Jalen Daniels at quarterback. If he stays healthy, which he hasn't been able to do, Kansas is one of the hardest teams to beat.
And now they have a home game again. Now they played every game last year, away from home. Yeah, they went to Arrowhead, and this year they got a shiny new stadium with cool wheat field end zones this year.
In years past, I mean, you wouldn't want Kansas to play at home just because no one would show up and the ones that did would boo. But now they're a legitimate Big 12 team. Last year, renovating that stadium, it was more difficult for them. Now they'll be home, like you said. But I think the team, if you're going to make me pick one who's going to win this, I'd say Kansas State. I think Avery Johnson at quarterback learned a lot last year in terms of how to be an effective passer, not just a quarterback who runs around and plays sandlot ball. And I think overall Kansas State is going to have the edge.
There's no way the BYU guy's going to say Utah. There's just no chance he's bringing up Utah as winning the Big 12.
Utah, I hate to say this, but I like Utah this year as well. They're going to be much improved, yeah.
Trevor, last question for you here. We got about a minute left. Kellen DeBoer and Alabama. How huge of a year is this for DeBoer, despite it only being his second year?
Well, it's massive because Alabama's not used to being where they were last year. I mean, they won 9 games, but they missed the playoff. And so Kalen DeBoer right now is the guy who replaced the legend. And the first year, from a fan standpoint, didn't go well. This year, though, Alabama's lying in the weeds. I think Kalen DeBoer is one of the best coaches in all of college football. He's won everywhere he's been at every level, and now he's got his offensive coordinator back with him, Ryan Grubb, who spent a year in the NFL last year. That's going to matter a lot. They'll have one of the nastiest defenses in the SEC, if not the nation. I think Ty Simpson has a huge arm at quarterback, and he'll be behind one of the best pass-blocking offensive lines in the SEC. And so I think Alabama is poised to have everybody focused on Texas and Arch Manning, and then Georgia with their reload, and then LSU buying a roster for this year like Ohio State did last year. I think that Alabama is sitting there in the weeds with the kind of a team that can win the SEC. So I think Kalen DeBoer, I expect him to have a terrific season this year with the Tide.
He is Trevor Matich, college football analyst for ESPN. You can find him on X at @TMatich. Trevor, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you down the road.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Pete.